Okay, the highlight of the day for us now, our keynote speaker. It gives me great pleasure to welcome the Right Honourable Anne Milton, who is Minister of State for Skills and Apprenticeships. And Minister, we're delighted that you can spend time out of what I know will be an extremely busy diary to come up to Coventry and to speak to us today and to take some questions from us. So, ladies and gentlemen, Anne Milton, thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's always nice when you're asked to give a speech to have a bit of time to sit in the hall and hear. And there are three things that struck me actually. First of all, we're all better than we know, and I think that is really, really important. If I think of some of the young people that I've met, that is absolutely critical. The other thing was that employers don't know very much, and they don't, not all of them. We're getting there. But the other thing is the importance of Outward Bound. I didn't do an Outward Bound course, and if I had done, it would have been a long time before the 80s, I can tell you that. But actually, the value of that sort of experience, I was thinking amongst traineeships would be very valuable. I wrote a little note to young Jamie, who works in my private office, to say, actually, we should have a look at that and what more we can do, because it is about building that confidence. Some social skills, you know, the Prince's Trust do some good work in this area, and there are a number of other organisations, but it's quite important, particularly for the group of young people, that just life left behind. And actually, some of the older people for whom life left behind. There are employers who pick them up. Often some of the supermarket chains, they come in to do what they perceive to be a casual job. And actually, the clever employers now are seeing the potential that those young people have, grabbing them and giving them a route into more rewarding careers. Anyway, I want to thank you all for inviting me here, and I want to thank Lindsay McCurdy, your Chief Executive, for her work in bringing together employers, universities, FE colleges, independent training providers, endpoint assessment bodies, and indeed myself. It's my pleasure to be here. This illustrates the crucial point across the FE and skills sector that everybody has a contribution to make. Absolutely everybody. It's a collaborative team effort. And it's maybe important for me to restate why we're all here, what the whole sector devotes its energy and efforts towards. And I will be saying things that you all know, but maybe it's an opportunity for me to set out my stall. Apprenticeships should provide high-quality skills training. And apprenticeships can offer it all those things I mentioned at the beginning. The technical experience, the industry know-how, the transferable skills, and critically, that can-do attitude to life. They are the tool giving employers a competitive advantage as well, securing new talent, lifting economic growth, and for the individual person, giving them a chance to be socially mobile, whatever word that you want to use. It gives them an opportunity, it gives them a path towards a better life. By creating opportunities for young people in every community, wherever they come from, whoever they know, and irrespective of their background. Positioning apprenticeships as a mark of excellence at whatever excellence that level is absolutely critical. Apprenticeships are about helping not just young people, but older people as well to dream big dreams. And for apprenticeships to do that, we had to make some big reforms. And I want to thank all of you, many of whom are in this room, for all your work connected to those changes in apprenticeships. Back in 2012, before my time in this role, there was a full review of apprenticeships, and that set the compass for a significantly ambitious and wholesale change in the way apprenticeships operate in England. At that time, we announced a move towards high-quality standards, the creation of the employer-led institute, the Institute for Apprenticeships, and a new funding system for apprenticeships and as I said, putting quality at its core. We also want to fundamentally change the perceptions of an apprenticeship. If you say the word apprenticeship to most people, they think plumber, electrician, or bricklayer. But we wanted to elevate their value further so that they provided real currency, not just for employers, but for the apprentice as well, to increase the quantity and the quality together, and ensuring a focus on making apprenticeships more accessible to smaller businesses. And as the mindset on apprenticeships has had to change, so apprenticeships themselves had to change to ensure they were more relevant to business. More rigorous, better structured, independently assessed, and more responsive to building skills in business, making sure that the benefits are increased productivity, staff retention, enhanced reputation, improved customer service, profitability, and cost savings, to name but a few. But we needed more employers to understand and access the benefits that apprenticeships offer. And as I said at the beginning, we've still a long way to go on that. The levy puts apprenticeship funding on a firm footing and ensures that the system is further driven by employers. It also encourages employers to take a long-term view of their skills needs. As a result of the levy, the apprenticeship budget is growing. The department is spending £2.45 billion. In 1920, that is double the cash in cash terms what it was in 2010-11. And I want that investment to have a big impact. I want every pound spent to be about improving skills, about making a difference to the individual, about making a difference to the economy. There are voices whispering that apprenticeship starts are low, but we knew that would happen. We have made some of the biggest reforms to apprenticeships in a generation, and it will take time for adjustments to be made, putting quality at the heart of the system to give employers those skilled workforces that they need. And today we've published the latest apprenticeship figures on starts. It is clear that employers will continue to take time to work through what those reforms mean to them, and indeed it is right that employers consider carefully how to maximise their investment, their tax, if you like, in a more effective way. But the feedback that we've had from levy payers so far has shown that they are doing just that and plan to increase their demand for apprenticeships. I was at the Bet Fair at the Excel Centre in London yesterday and talking to a guy from Microsoft. They currently have 5,000 apprenticeships. And I said, are you hoping to employ more? He said, oh, yeah, don't worry. We've got a plan to employ 30,000 by 2020. So those plans are in the making. But I need to continue to work more closely with employers to support that. And indeed, I have realised that I've got 650 disciples, if you like, within the House of Commons, MPs, who need to understand what is happening, need to understand the role they can play, actually often in levering their local authorities to bring together business, to bring together training providers, to bring together the FE colleges and all the other people involved in the sector to realise what has changed, what's happening, and the opportunities that exist. So just a word about quality. The Institute for Apprenticeship is the catalyst for ramping up quality. New standards are inextricably linked to the pursuit of high quality. Standards, as you know, are designed to make sure apprenticeships deliver the exact skills, behaviours and knowledge that employers need from them. Replacing the complex framework with short, simple, accessible apprenticeship standards written by employers in the language employers understand. And I'm very pleased to see, I understand that some of the Trailblazer chairs are in the audience today. And I applaud the work that you have done designing the new standards. But I also know that at times it can be frustrating. I really know. You know, the Institute for Apprenticeships is a new body. And as with all new bodies, there's a great deal of back office systems that have to be in place. I think it hasn't been as responsive as it should be. It hasn't been as quick as it should be. Relationship management hasn't always been as it should be. And I have had conversations with the new chair, new chief executive, and what I want is for the Institute to be as smooth as a sheet of glass. Because then I can go out and beat employers over the head and say, what are you doing? Where are you spending their lobby? Don't come and moan to me that you haven't got the skilled workforce you need. We've got the Institute that is going to benchmark the quality for you, so you need to get on and do your bit. But we do need the Institute working absolutely properly. I know that they're working very hard to do that. We've got 290 trailblazers in place involving more than 1,500 employers, and they have developed over 500 new standards in occupations as diverse as accounting to digital marketing and nuclear decommissioning. And 70 of those standards are for higher and degree apprenticeships. I want employers to get involved and to work with us on the changes. No new system, as I say, is perfect, but I remain open-minded and will be flexible about how the system needs to change to make sure we have what we want. High-quality apprenticeships and the skilled workforce we need. Employers are firmly in charge of the skills system now. It is indeed all of your system. And my plea also to employers will be to offer T-level work placements. T-levels are to be the gold standard for technical and professional excellence, but absolutely aligned with the apprenticeship system. The government has announced 500 million investment from April to fund high-quality work placements, and those will be a crucial part of the new T-level qualifications to help prepare young people for skilled work. Alongside apprenticeships, I am also clear that the only way to get this right is through genuine collaboration between business, government and education professionals, all of you in this room. T-levels will help deliver a world-class technical qualification that will maintain the confidence of employers, not just for a few years, but for decades to come. And we need employers to step up and offer those work placements. Ahead of your conference, the organisers were kind enough to share with me 2 concerns raised by delegates. Sometimes I'm surprised, but it was nice to know 2 things that I might address just briefly, but we'll have a Q&A, so do please come back to me on that. The first is off-the-job training. It matters, it does matter, but we are not particularly prescriptive about how this is done. But it is an established principle in the delivery of a quality apprenticeship. The focus on apprenticeships is the teaching of new skills. This was agreed upon following an extensive qualification. This is public money, and there has to be an identified training need to justify that money being spent. I was having a discussion in the Department for Education before I came. We were introducing the new Secretary of State to some of the specific aspects of the apprenticeship programme, and we were talking about what used to be in place before. And the trouble was that there were lots of apprenticeships that actually had no training associated with it. Some of the young people who the employer said was an apprentice didn't even know that that's what they were. Secondly, the non-levy procurement. Believe you me, if I wasn't grey already and didn't go to the hairdresser frequently enough, I would have very grey hair, even greyer than it already is. We didn't do this by choice. There was a very clear requirement for the entire invitation to tender to strictly adhere to EU procurement rules. And EU directives are not set in sand, they are set in cement. The initial awards totalled £485 million, money to deliver apprenticeship training to small businesses. The procurement was a highly competitive process with clear terms and criteria set out at the start, and over 1,000 bids were evaluated, and officials in the department went through how that evaluation took place. I was very clear that I didn't want people to come back to me. There will probably be people in this room who will come back to me and say that it was unfair. You know, 3 different officials made these assessments independently. Where they differed, they went back and re-looked at them. But employers have a big choice of providers to select to work with. Last week, just a couple of quotes because I think it's important. Last week at the National Apprenticeship Awards, Landa Automotive was the winner of the category of Small Employer of the Year. And to quote them, they said, "The opportunities for our young employees have never been greater. The apprenticeship programme is a fundamental part of our strategic business planning process and our drive for excellence. Let there be no doubt, I want more SMEs to be part of our apprenticeship changes." On the South Coast, there is currently a company called Burton Boats. Its managing director, Brian May, not the guitarist, said, "Burton has again taken on 10 apprentices to ensure that we not only replace the skills we need, but it also provides us with the capability to bid for larger contracts, knowing we have more apprenticeship graduates in the pipeline." Another great endorsement from small business, and I could quote you a great deal more. I want more SMEs to emulate the vision shared by both Burton Boats and Landa Automotive. I said at the start that collaboration is pivotal to apprenticeships. And as Minister for this area, my passion really does burn very brightly. I didn't go to university. I did, when I left school, what was the equivalent of an apprenticeship in nursing. But more so when I see every part of the team working together, heading in the same direction. We can be greater than the sum total of our individual parts. Just look how the sector is rallying together to help apprentices who were at Carillion as it collapsed. The ESFA, not always a friend of everybody, but it did move swiftly in conjunction with the construction industry training board to find new employers, because working closely, the sector will achieve more. Because together, every apprenticeship matters. Every person who wants to train, who needs to train, matters. And as a country, competing globally, for me as part of this government, it truly matters. Thank you very much.
Sit down. Okay. Thank you very much, Minister.
It's a bit like Good Morning Britain.
It is, isn't it? And we've got a few questions,
yes,
if that's okay. Just before I ask the first, and I'll ask a couple and then we'll open it up to the audience. I noticed that the BBC parliamentary correspondent said of you this morning, in response to your answer to the rather unfortunate circumstances around the President's Club in Parliament yesterday, that you gave a personal, a passionate and a very effective answer to the questions. So I think we're hoping for more of that this afternoon.
Well, it will always be honest, and if I don't know the answer, I will say I don't know the answer. Okay, you can't stop me up now. My youngest child, I've got 4 children, my youngest child was 9 when I got elected to Parliament in 2005. And I decided then I had no time to write speeches, that if you always were honest, then you couldn't go far wrong because you always knew what the answer was. You only had to say what you knew.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so our first question, and I think it's quite an easy intro. If we were sitting here in 3 years' time and you were still in your current post, bearing in mind some of the things you've just told us, what would you be talking about in terms of the government's achievements in the apprenticeship space?
What would I be proud of?
Yes.
What would I feel like?
What would you like to see has happened?
What would success look like? That's that question. Actually, interestingly, because I had some foresight of the questions, and if you're a government minister, and if ever you have an opposition spokesman in front of you, feel a bit sorry for them, because I'm fortunate to have the facilities of the Department for Education. And actually, they sent me some possible things that I might be proud of. And one made me smile, because one of them was ensure that our economy has the skills it needs post-Brexit in all sectors and at all levels. And, you know, if I deconstructed that, absolutely. I want employers to have the skills they need. Ever since I became an MP, my constituency is Guildford. We have a lot of business in the area, quite a lot of high-tech businesses in various sectors. And business was always saying to me that they had graduates coming out of university without the skills that they needed. But actually, for me, it is quite personal. It is about having more apprenticeships, because I think apprenticeships are the way to go. If I talk to schools now, I say to school children, don't think about what university degree you need, think about the skills you need, because the new world out there is about skills. It's not necessarily about knowledge. But I think it's also, on a very personal level, about giving young people an opportunity. So yes, I want 3 million apprentices. I'll have more if they're available, but they've got to be high quality. They've got to be life-changing. So it's not just about high levels, it's about level 2, and it's about traineeships. It's about giving somebody a step down a path that will change their lives.
Okay, thank you. You've made reference there to 3 million apprenticeships, and it's good to hear you reintroducing the phrase high quality, because when David Cameron first announced that as a government target, I was a civil servant at the time and only too well aware that high quality was very much attached to the 3 million. It became dropped. We talked about 3 million and forget the high quality bit, so it's really good to hear you putting that phrase back. But one of my questions around that is, and you may not have heard this, but Digby Jones this lunchtime was commenting on the current numbers, and I think the latest figures are that we're 40% down year on year, and he was blaming that on the levy and saying that, you know, it's entirely the fault of the levy, that's put employers off, and, you know, that's the reason why. What do you put down the lower numbers to? What's your analysis of that?
I mean, the levy is a tax, a ring-fenced tax, essentially, and business never likes government taking money off it. So there would have been a lot of noise before it came in, and I think the government was right to press ahead. You know, historically in this country, employers have put low amounts of money, and I think in some ways that's not entirely their fault. They've looked to government to provide them with the skilled young people that they need, which is a bit daft, really, because they know better about the skills they need. I think that saying that the levy will put people off employing apprentices is a really peculiar thing to say. It makes no sense. You've got money in a training account. You can't use it for anything else, so you will eventually be forced to address what you are going to spend it on. There was a big spike in apprenticeship starts before the changes came in April. It was a huge spike, actually, and because everybody wanted to get in on the old frameworks, so it wasn't surprising. So although the starts have dropped, they've not actually dropped but it's slightly further than we expected, but not entirely. This is a huge change. It's not just about employers and training providers and FE. This is about parents and teachers as well. So alongside this, what mattered to me was the career strategy, which I launched at the end of last year. New requirements also for schools to have a lead governor, to have a school leader on careers, obligations for schools to invite in training providers, FE colleges, employers, because actually what we have to do is to open the minds of teachers and parents. There's a lot of intellectual snobbery around about what you should do when you leave school, I think. I was on BBC Radio Kent, before I came up here, talking about exactly this. You know, UCAS is an easy direction. So you're at school, it's very easy, it's straightforward. You fill out the forms, you go to university, you get a good degree without really giving any thought about what next. I mean, obviously, in some professions, it's clear what next. But for a lot of kids, I think they leave school without really thinking about it. You know, and again, I speak as a parent. It's an easy box to tick. Oh, that's right. So-and-so's gone to university, now I don't need to worry about this for another 3 years. It takes a bit more effort to think about all the other options that are open to kids. And so it's changing the mindset. I think we started, I think there's a bit of a tipping point. Not least because of the media interest in this. There was a bit of media interest around degree apprenticeships after the exam results came out in the August. What I'm quite pleased about is that that interest has carried on and extended to looking at level 2, level 3, level 4 and level 5 apprenticeships. So all of you need to go out and talk about it.
So do you put the decline, yes, except there was a spike, but do you put the decline down to, in a sense, all the reforms, a degree of newness, employers still coming to terms and understanding the new system?
Yeah, I think employers also saying, I've now got a pot of money, so actually I need to think quite carefully about how I spent it. So, you know, talking to the guy from Microsoft yesterday was quite interesting. You know, they've got those 5,000 apprenticeships. They clearly have thought about where they're doing. They've got their plan in place so that they can predict that they will have those 30,000 in 2020. I know the BBC Academy have done a lot of planning. But a lot of people haven't yet woken up to the fact that they've got this levy to spend. You know, local authorities, for instance, who will all be levy payers, will have this money. And I think that planning does take time. And I guess it'll be when the financial director taps on the chief executive's shoulder and says, yeah, well, you've got this pot here. What are you going to spend it on? I was recently at Tesco. Am I allowed to mention? Yes, I am.
Yes, you are.
I was recently at Tesco's. Tesco's really, I mean, they're going to have a lot of money in their pot, really thinking about how they're going to spend this money, making sure that they actually have in place the right talent spotting within their workforce. Maybe people doing level 2 or level 3 apprenticeships, you know, who are the ones who they feel could go on into other careers. And I think also the ability for levy payers to transfer. 10% of their levy fund will make a difference. We're not being terribly prescriptive. But for an organisation like Tesco's, that actually gives them quite a lot of opportunity.
Okay. Other supermarkets are available, of course.
Yeah, all of the supermarkets. Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I'm focusing on Tesco.
No, that's fine. And my final question before I open it to the floor, so that's a hint to my colleagues out there to think of a robust question. I'm involved in a lot of trailblazer work. I used to work for the SFA. And there's a bit of a view at the moment that the ESFA and the IFA are sort of getting in the way of some of this stuff at the moment. No. You talked about the procurement process, which quite frankly was a shambles. Some of the things that IFA have done in their first year have not exactly helped the development, for example, of new trailblazers. What are your aspirations for ESFA and IFA over the next 12 months, 2 years?
I mean, the ESFA, let me start with that. It's one of those extraordinary entities that I knew absolutely nothing about until I took on this job. It was another set of government initials, but, you know, they distribute, I think, about £63 billion worth of funding, huge amounts of government money. My own personal dealings with the ESFA actually have been very good. I usually call on them when I get reports of money being misspent. And they're very responsive. But, I mean, what's important for me and actually for other ministers who have dealings with the ESFA is anecdotal examples of where something's gone wrong. You know, your best port of call is always your local MP. If you don't know who your local MP is, just go on a website called They Work For You, put in your postcode, you'll find them. Either where your business is or where you live, it doesn't really matter which. give a specific example and say, can this be investigated? Because as members of Parliament, as government ministers, we are it's very necessary for us to receive those specific reports of where you think something has gone wrong. If it's in my area, I will always look at it. I will always talk to the ESFA. My feeling about the Institute for Apprenticeships is I'd give it a bit of a break because it was new. If I had to pick the things that I think have worked badly, it was certainly around relationship management. I always think that actually in any organisation, relationship management is about the most important thing that people do. It is often given to people who, in my view, are not necessarily highly qualified enough. I think relationship managers need to be quite highly qualified, quite skilled, with quite a lot of experience to back them up, because in order to manage a relationship, you need a lot of emotional intelligence. You need to be able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and not be obstructive. And I think there was a tendency for the IFA to act like a gatekeeper, almost like the doctor's receptionist, you know, protecting the institute from attack. And actually that needs to be smoother. I know there was an issue about the lag on approving standards, and that needs to be an iterative process. It mustn't be, no, you can't, no, that's not right, end of story. It needs to be a piece of work, an ongoing piece of work. And I know that the Institute, I've got it written down here, you know, I know they're bringing in a two-stage process, I believe, which I hope will make things smoother. But I'm reliant on you to tell me when it's not working. I would hope to meet the board regularly and frequently, and certainly Jerry Brannigan, the Chief Executive, I've already met several times, and I will continue to meet him. I know he is very keen to get this operating smoothly. Just give it a little bit of a break. It's been frustrating for you, but it's a new organisation.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Okay, opportunity to questions from the floor, and I'm going to give Lindsay first prerogative here. So can we have a microphone for Lindsay, please? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne, for coming today. I really appreciate it. I've been working in this sector for 6-7 years, and my passion for apprenticeships is for young people to start apprenticeships. The one thing that hasn't happened, the number of young people over all that time entering apprenticeships each year has not grown. And it gets hidden amongst this figure of 3 million, which actually you could say is the old train to gain being used to increase numbers for already employed people. We talk about quality. The other thing that I would like to mention is young people actually getting paid the minimum wage. When you have surveys coming out and saying 42% of apprentices aren't getting the right wage, even if you split that in half, why isn't something being done to ensure that young people that are on the minimum wage are getting the minimum apprentice wage?
Okay, just a couple of things about that. I was looking at the figures today on level 2, as you say. Those figures aren't going up. We've got a piece of work to interrogate why. Because in theory they should be rising, and what are the other young people doing instead? So we need to do a piece of work on that. That cohort is getting smaller, so as a proportion of the population it is getting smaller, but very aware of that. Certainly there is a group of young people for whom school never worked. Possibly their background is quite disruptive, quite dysfunctional. There is a group in there that we need to grab hold of. And I'm doing some work with the Department for Work and Pensions on how we better get hold of that group of people and help them back onto a path that will lead to those level 2 apprenticeships. And the other question you asked, just remind me, Lindsay,
was around the minimum wage.
Oh, it was around the minimum wage. You have to tell us. I mean, you know, they have to be. This is the law.
It is the law, but my concern, you do a survey and you talk to apprentices. I think just under 5,000 apprentices were spoken to.
What? Okay, so what I need, or the appropriate minister needs, is an example.
I will give it to you.
X apprentice from Y is not being, I mean, we are absolutely, we will, if people are not complying with the law, we will enforce the law. So we need to know about it. The difficulty with figures, as you say, and, you know, it might make a piece in the newspaper. I sometimes read those things and think, well, nobody's given me the detail. You know, this employer is not employing people on the minimum wage.
Okay, Lindsay, I'm going to stop you there. You might be the conference organiser, but gentleman at the back has his hand raised. So there's a microphone. In fact, there's 2 microphones whizzing their way to you. Take your pick.
Hello, Minister. Richard, I run the mentoring school. One thing that we found, and certainly we've done some small-scale research on this, is that many employees are actually concerned about the extra workload and about the support that apprentices need. And it's no different with the DWP return to work schemes and things like that. So my question is, what is the government or what are the departments doing about upskilling the current workforce to be able to support the needs of apprentices, of long-term unemployed, of younger generations? Because actually that's going to lead to a loss in completion rates, retention rates and engagement and satisfaction.
Yeah, you raise a very good point. Just to deal with the long-term unemployed in particular, that relates slightly back to what I was talking about with Lindsay. And we're very aware that, you know, we need to do better. I need to work more closely with DWP. There is a lot of good work going on. And actually, it'll be interesting because the new Secretary of State, of course, has come from the Department of Work and Pensions, and this was in his area. So I know this is uppermost in his mind. And a relatively small number of young people need an extraordinarily high amount of support to turn their life around into getting into work. The Centre for Social Justice, I can remember, did a report probably about 12 years ago now, it might be longer, looking at particularly 2nd and 3rd generation of young people in families who'd never been employed. And I'm fortunate, all my working life was in one of the most deprived parts of the country at that time, the most deprived part of the country. But I think it's hard for people to conceive that for some young people, the prospect of Sunday night being the night before you go back to work for the following week is incomprehensible. The fact that you have to turn up at 9 o'clock in the morning maybe is incomprehensible. It is just not something they or their parents or their grandparents have ever done. And so those people need a lot of support. And for me, it's not just about an economic imperative. I think there's a moral responsibility to do so as well. In terms of the support, so employers who haven't seen the light, let's put it that way, absolutely say, well, of course, apprentices need a lot of support. Why would I do it? And then they will say, you know, we haven't got the skilled workforce we need. So they will say two, which are relatively contradictory things. And I think really the most important messages are from employers who have seen the light. You know, I was at some Apprenticeships awards in the summer, and there's a woman who runs an extraordinarily successful business. She does a lot of cybersecurity, has contracts with a lot of government departments. And she stood on the stage and said, I owe the success of my business to the apprentices I have employed. Because actually, what you're investing in is not about this week, but it is probably about the year. Because as the apprenticeship, as any good employer knows, new blood brings new ideas, new ways of working. And if employers, if businesses want to keep up with the huge changes that are coming downstream at them, this is a way of doing it. It is about turning their heads to a new world. And I said to somebody recently, some of the London MPs were talking to me about skills, devolution of skills budget, and I said, anytime you want me to come out and talk to local council leaders in London and chief executive, I will do, because actually local authorities are quite a good facilitator to turn the employers' heads who haven't seen where the future of that business lies. As you know, one of the quotes I had was about the fact that this isn't just about an employer keeping the skills that they've got, it's about keeping the skilled workforce that they need. If you're employing 10 apprentices, that means in 3 years' time, you can be expanding your business, bidding for the bigger contracts, because you will have the workforce in place. But I can't do it on my own, because I simply can't go and speak to every employer in the country. The Department for Education does a lot of work around the country, and I know that we are ramping up that work. It's Apprenticeship Week at the beginning of March, and I'm working to get MPs to make sure that they bring together employers, local training providers, FE colleges, and a number of MPs are holding skills fairs with the two, so that employers who don't understand the benefits start to understand them. Yes, there's some input, but there's always, I mean, the input in terms of man and woman power in time is no different to the input that you put in terms of cash. You have to invest to get more out at the other end, whether it's time or money.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question. I'm just going to go to the lady here then. Yes, please.
Hi, and my name is Arit, and I run a company called Diva, and we deliver apprenticeships and TV, largely in the music industries. And one of the challenges that I'm finding is around the 20% off the job, in the sense not only just for new talent coming in, but also upskilling the existing workforce. And I want to know whether or not that is fixed, whether there's a possibility for some flexibility in that. And also when it comes to social mobility, we've got English and maths, which is delivered in addition to that 20%, which is quite off-putting when it comes to diversity, and trying to open up access to the industry for people who don't necessarily have those skills, but for employers who can't necessarily accommodate that additional time to get those qualifications.
Yeah, I mean, you raised some quite important things. I know that there are specific issues around the creative industries, and music will be in there. And I know that there are specific issues around training young people in industries that are essentially where everybody's self-employed, and usually employed by agencies. And I'm trying to work with Matt Hancock, who's the Secretary of State in DCMS, so has responsibility for this area, and I've done quite a few round tables to make sure that we can make this system work. And as I said in my speech, I'm flexible. You can look at the rules around 20% off the job training. It is quite flexible, but it's important that people have the training that they need. The flip side is where it used to be, where people didn't get training. So I'm always constantly rebalancing the line. I want people to get the training, and I don't want people to be abused. So it's about getting that line. And although you might be a very responsible employer, I have to make sure that things, you know, I will go as close to the line as possible, because that's what government always does. It makes the rules too strict, and then it is, you know, government can be like a blanket, you know, that it throws over all the creation and innovation that's out there. So I don't want to make the rules strict, and I will allow as much laxity as I possibly can to accommodate the needs of all the individual sectors. But have a look at the rules, because as I say, I think they are quite flexible. Your point about English and maths is quite an interesting one, and I'm looking at the new curriculum for functional skills for English and maths. My colleague Nick Gibb, who's Minister for Schools, is brought in quite big changes in the teaching of English and maths. The first cohort are going through now, but they're not out the other end. The truth of the matter is, we have a big problem on English and maths in this country. If you look at the figures on numeracy, literacy, and digital skills, they are really shocking. really, really shocking. 11.5 million people in this country don't have basic digital skills. Something like 45% of adults have the numeracy skills of an 11-year-old or less. So meanwhile, while the Department of Health are putting clever information on the front of all the food you buy, actually 45% of the population would not be able to understand it. But I take your point. It's a hard ask. I think what we've got to do is to make sure before young people come to you through traineeships that the level of English and maths that they have achieved is higher. But it is important. I was recently at the World Skills Competition and Conference last year in Abu Dhabi, and it was quite interesting talking to other ministers from around the world. And actually everybody said the same thing as I said. You know, we've got a world skills shortage. Parents and teachers are a bit of a block to this. They can only think of university. But what was quite interesting was talking to the minister from Singapore. Their technical and vocational education system is very strong. And I said, you know, why do you think it is? Is it something that government has done? I mean, they have a very much more restrictive robust education system, and he said if I had to put it down to one thing, it's because English and maths is really embedded in the school curriculum. Until those kids, until we've got to that stage, until that cohort of children come out the other end with it being embedded, we have to pick up the shortfall. So I'm not going to apologise too much for the requirement, but if there are specific things that you feel would help, then do let me know either through this organisation, through your local MP, or directly to my private office.
It's more being able to incorporate it within that 20%, and it's not so much, I get there's flexibility in the delivery of it, that's not the issue, it's that arbitrary figure of 20% in. Are you going to shut me up?
No, I'm not going
to shut you up.
It's more about quality over quantity. Yeah. It's a quality. If they go to a networking event on a Friday evening, why can't that be like their 20% off the job?
I'm not sure.
But it has to be time off in lieu the next day. But
I think Minister Watts.
I'm just going to say something. You've got good ideas. That was one example. It's a good example. A networking event for a young apprentice or an old apprentice, actually, is maybe part of their training. So make those points. Do email me. What I really valuable is people who email me, write to me and say, how about? What ideally I like is for an event like this to collect those. Actually, hand everybody out a post-it note and collect the post-it notes and say, how about? How about doing X, Y, or Z? Because actually, people who are on the ground have the good ideas, absolutely good ideas. But bear in mind, just if you could say, how about, and if you want to stop people abusing the system, you could also. Do you see what I mean? Yes. But you will probably have better ideas. Government doesn't know it all. You don't. Yes, I know too.
Brilliant. I think one of the issues, Minister, is around the 20% applying right across the apprenticeship structure, and I think that's part of the issue. So I mean, for example, if you've got somebody who's doing a chartered management degree apprenticeship, 20% offline learning, frankly, is probably not difficult for them to do. They're going to be in a management role. They manage their own time. They can do all of that, and it's relevant and contributes to the training and additional knowledge that they need. Absolutely. No, I don't think anybody's disputing the need for off-job training. It's this 20% bit. Contrast that with somebody in retail who's doing a level 2, whose job is serving customers. Throughout their year and 5 days apprenticeship, they've got to do 20% off-job training. Once they've done their product knowledge, their health and safety, their customer service, I know retailers really struggle with what on earth else we do. And it's the 20% that applies everywhere that's the issue.
I know. And my challenge back on that, I know exactly what you're saying. And interestingly, I'm doing a round table with some people from the retail and hospitality sector. To have a look at what standards we should be bringing in. So the danger with this is that we fill the skills gap we have, and what we don't do is give people the skills they're going to need in 10 years' time. So there are some figures, I don't have them to hand, but in 20 years' time, 70% of the jobs will be jobs that you've never even heard of. Artificial intelligence coming down the line. So if you take retail, what skills, actually, they don't just need that. What they need to know is how to position the retail sector 5 years from now. And so it's not just for now, it's also looking ahead. But your point is well made. I know, and I'm thinking about it.
Good, thank you.
But those what about, how about?
That's great, okay. And thank you for your question. I wasn't going to shut you up at all.
I'm conscious of time.
Right, yes. Can we take one more? Can we take?
Yeah, well, why don't we take the three and I'll see if I can do quick.
Okay, right. So the three people who have their hands up, can we have very quick, succinct questions? So no monologues, please. A quick question, and hopefully the Minister can answer them. Sir.
My name is Ashok Kumar, and I represent Total Training Company Limited. What we deliver apprenticeships and traineeships in the construction sector through nationwide. We have got offices in Hartlepool and Birmingham. My question is that the green card, which is a must to enter the construction sector, there is no funding for it. We have to pay it for ourselves on the AB, if the client is on the AB on the traineeship, to pay it for ourselves. And if we had funding, we can give them some plant training and they will be more employable and sooner than later.
Okay. Thank you. Fine.
Let me take them all.
Oh, you take them all. Right, okay. Let's, can we have gentleman at the back, and then it was gentleman over there, I think, as well.
Andrew Langdale from the Management Academy. We're a training provider. Minister, how about this? We've heard a lot about the fall in starts. We also know there are lots of levy-paying companies that haven't yet dug into the levy pot. How about identifying by employer the number of starts they had over a fixed 12-month period, or whatever measure you want to use, and comparing it with where they are today? That way, you'll individually identify the companies that are falling behind, and you'll be able to chivvy them into a lot more action.
Okay, so that's not a question. That's good. Saves a bit of time. That's a how about. Good. And the final one was gentleman over there.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Minister. My name is Simon from the BBC Academy. You talked earlier about apprenticeships as a tool for social mobility, and we all understand that. How do you feel about employers who divert the levy to upskill, or you might even say superskill, existing staff who are already in their employ? Or is that a loophole you're planning to close?
Okay, just Ashok, the green card is very much in my sights. I've heard this. There are specific needs around construction on my desk, as it were, because I know you're not alone. Andrew, young Jamie will have written that down, and I mean, cross-cutting all these figures, which we've done a deep dive into employers. So we've done some personal calls with employers, finding out what they're going to do with the levy. Actually, what was encouraging is actually most of the ones that officials phoned do have a plan and are going to do them. But actually cross-cutting them that way might be quite interesting. And I should write to them. Interestingly, in the debate yesterday, Justine Greening, the former Secretary of State, stood up and said, I wonder how many businesses at that dinner, wherever it was, the night before last, I wonder how many of those businesses have published their gender pay gap, which was a very good point. So cross-cutting it, I'm not against naming and shaming people, actually. You know, it can be sometimes quite a good tool. You know, you've got 200 million sitting in a pot, Mr. Very Large Bank. What are you spending it on? You know, the point at the BBC Academy, who have done excellent work, I gather, particularly in the area of employing young people and older people with learning difficulties or disabilities. So I applaud them. I think that, interestingly, if you look at productivity, a lot of the research out there shows that one of the things that drives productivity is management. So upskilling and superskilling existing staff isn't necessarily for the country a waste of time. But for me personally, on a personal level, I come back to Lindsay. those I want them in at the bottom as well. So it's not one or the other. I will keep an eye on it. And of course, degree apprenticeships at the moment, all priced at £27,000. You know, there's a good case to say that not all degrees cost as much as £27,000 to deliver. So I'm also very aware of that. We need to watch it. I don't want it away. But the country has an interest in super skilling some people.
Minister, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.